Making up for lost time, Ethiopia wants to restore relations with Eritrea as soon as possible. Why the urgency? A United Nations report details a campaign of rape and killings in South Sudan, pointing the finger at the government. And living with vitiligo, how a fashion model is redefining what it means to be beautiful. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. It was a day that many people thought would never arrive. The leaders of Ethiopia and Eritrea on Monday signed a joint declaration of peace and friendship. The historic summit marked a start to normalization of ties between the longtime foes. Matthew Larotonda reports.
A warm farewell for the leaders of long-term foes Eritrea and Ethiopia, heralding the end of a 20-year military standoff. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed met his Eritrean counterpart, Isaias Afwerki, for a historic summit at which a peace deal was signed, meaning a 2-decade state of war between the neighbors appears to be over. Embassies will be reopened, flights between the two capitals will resume, and direct telephone connections will also be restored. And in a potential economic boost for both countries, landlocked Ethiopia will work with Eritrea to develop its ports on the Red Sea coast. The talks were the product of an unexpected peace initiative by Ethiopia's new reformist prime minister, who was only elected in April. Last month, Abiy surprised his country by accepting a ruling that awarded disputed territory to Eritrea. The East African neighbors fought a war in the late 1990s in which around 80,000 people died. Full-blown fighting ended in 2000, but troops have faced off across the disputed border ever since. With both leaders now promising love and peace between the nations, the hostility may finally come to an end.
Well, Eritreans living in Israel expressed views of skepticism following the announcement that the war between Ethiopia and Eritrea is over. They are not convinced that life will improve back home because of the new developments.
I'm not happy with this peace agreement. Why? If we say that, why? Because this peace agreement is not including the Eritrean people. This peace agreement is done between the dictator in Eritrea and between the Ethiopian government. If this is not concerned about the Eritrean people, we are not accept and we are not going to back, because still the dictator is over there. So our problem in Eritrea is not because of the border. Our problem is because of dictatorship.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres praised the leaders of Ethiopia and Eritrea and said that sanctions imposed on Eritrea might become obsolete following the peace deal between the two countries. Speaking to reporters in the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Guterres said UN would be entirely at the disposal of the two countries to do whatever is necessary to facilitate the success of the deal.
I believe that the recent evolution in relation to between Eritrea and Ethiopia is a very important signal of hope, not only for the two countries, not only for Africa, but for the whole world.
The UN imposed penalties, including an arms embargo on Eritrea in 2009, accusing it of supporting Islamist militants in neighboring Somalia, a charge Eritrea has denied. Not too far from there, the United Nations said Tuesday that at least 232 civilians were killed and 120 women and girls were raped or gang raped in the spring in attacks by South Sudan government troops and aligned forces in opposition-held villages. The UN identified 3 commanders suspected of bearing the greatest responsibility in the violence in Unity State between April the 16th and May 24th. According to a UN human rights report, the violence may amount to war crimes. Elderly and civilians were burned alive, while women and girls were raped in the attacks aimed at driving out opposition forces. Spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ravina Shamdasani, said the perpetrators of these revolting acts against defenseless civilians must not be allowed to get away with it.
How the SPLA and aligned forces would storm into villages in the early morning around dawn. surround the village, and start shooting at fleeing civilians. The attackers would then steal cattle, loot entire households, and burn down houses and food stocks. Civilians were targeted, with the elderly, people with disabilities, and very young children killed in horrific acts of violence. Some hung from trees, and others burned alive in their own homes.
Well, there was no immediate reaction to the report from the government in Juba. On Monday, South Sudan rebels rejected a peace plan to reinstate insurgent leader Riek Machar as vice president, and a deal reached at talks in Uganda the day before. Italy is once again refusing to allow a vessel to bring ashore rescued migrants. The commercial ship that supplies oil platforms off the coast of Libya rescued 66 migrants on Monday, but it was told not to bring them to Italy, according to an interior ministry source. Italy's new government is sticking to a hardline policy on new arrivals as it presses its European allies to share the burden of hosting an influx of displaced people. It has so far refused to accept migrants sent back from the German border. More than 650,000 migrants, mostly from Africa and the Middle East, have been sent to sea on overcrowded boats by human smugglers since 2014. Thousands have perished, but those rescued have been brought to Italy, and many later headed north to other European countries. Political parties in Nigeria are starting to realign in the run-up to the general elections in 2019. The main opposition parties have agreed to form an alliance to field a joint candidate to challenge President Muhammadu Buhari, according to a memorandum on Monday. Buhari announced in April that he would seek another term. His candidacy depends on party approval, though that is usually seen as a formality for the incumbent. Buhari's ruling All Progressive Congress Party split last week when one faction declared it no longer supported his government. The splinter group, known as the Reformed All Progressives Congress, the People's Democratic Party, and 37 other political parties are in the new alliance, hoping to defeat the APC. The alliance could pose a major threat to Buhari's re-election bid. U.S. President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, is taking his first step Tuesday towards securing his place on the High Court when he begins meeting with senators to shore up support for his nomination ahead of hearings. Here's VOA's Michael Brown.
President Trump chose Kavanaugh to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy.
Judge Kavanaugh currently teaches at Harvard, Yale, and Georgetown. Throughout legal circles, he is considered a judge's judge, a true thought leader among his peers.
Kavanaugh, a 53-year-old conservative-leaning federal judge for the past 12 years, with an extensive legal paper trail, is also no stranger to executive branch politics and controversy.
If confirmed by the Senate, I will keep an open mind in every case, and I will always strive to preserve the Constitution of the United States and the American rule of law.
Known as a devout Catholic, Kavanaugh's position on one of America's most politically charged issues, abortion, has raised concern on both sides.
Everyone here knows what is at stake. What is at stake is women's freedom, our freedom to make our own decisions, our freedom to decide when and how many children we are going to have.
Amanda Hollis-Brusky, an expert on the Supreme Court, believes derailing Kavanaugh is unlikely.
There are very few surprises about nominees anymore, very few bombs that are dropped in the middle of a confirmation hearing. So, like I said, delay could be the only hope for the Democrats here.
Still, Kavanaugh's selection will likely spark a major confirmation battle in the U.S. Senate, where Republicans hold a narrow 51-49 majority, and opposition Democrats say they will fight to prevent the High Court from swinging further to the right.
But I assure you, we will not back down from the fight, and we will see President Trump's nominee confirmed on a timely basis consistent with previous nominees.
Enormously important issues hang in the balance. The right of workers to organize, the pernicious influence of dark money in our politics, the right of Americans to marry whom they love, the right to vote.
Some legal experts are already speaking as though Kavanaugh's path to the Supreme Court might represent a sort of coronation. One observer told VOA Kavanaugh's selection was not a major surprise and that he has been groomed for the job. Kavanaugh could become Trump's second Supreme Court placement after selecting conservative Neil Gorsuch to succeed Antonin Scalia, who died at the age of 79 in February of 2016. Michael Brown, VOA News.
President Trump is scheduled to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin later this month in Helsinki. The administration says Trump will use the meeting to hold Russia accountable for its malign activities, including interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Moscow's meddling and potential collusion with the Trump campaign is still being investigated in a probe that continues to divide the country. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has more.
It has all the hallmarks of a box office political thriller. A controversial president, an enigmatic special counsel, even an adult film star.
Hi, everyone.
The Russia Probe is America's biggest reality show under President Trump.
I think we have only seen the tip of the iceberg on that.
Seems like they're hiding something, because Putin doesn't get blamed for anything.
In January 2017, U.S. intelligence agencies concluded Russia meddled in the 2016 elections to help Donald Trump.
So help me God.
In May 2017, Robert Mueller was appointed to lead a special investigation, including of possible collusion between Moscow and the Trump campaign.
Traitor Trump! Traitor Pat!
Show us all the evidence. The Russia probe is a divisive issue. As can be expected, opinions fall along party lines, with Republicans overwhelmingly perceiving the investigations as politically motivated.
God bless America.
Trump often calls it a witch hunt, and his supporters agree.
I think it's a distraction. I think the media and a lot of holdovers from the Obama administration that are involved in it now are very much, their intent is to distract.
I think I'd like to see it just go away at this point in time, because they've had many opportunities to produce something and nothing's really been shown.
A June report by the Democracy Fund Voter Study Group showed most Trump supporters do not think the investigation is being conducted fairly. But according to the study's author, nearly half of Americans do.
People generally think that the investigation is fair. They think the charges, if proven true, are very serious. And they tend to think that any sort of intervention on the part of the president would be inappropriate, either in the form of pardons or replacing Mueller.
Fair or not, Republican lawmakers are getting impatient.
If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. If you have evidence that this president acted inappropriately, present it to the American people.
The two leaders are scheduled to meet in Helsinki, Finland on July 16th. The administration says Trump will use the summit to hold Putin accountable for Russian activities, including election meddling. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, a look at skin disease with no cure. But first, a look at Tuesday's headlines. For a Stanford Health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with a look at a skin disease with no known cure. Lino.
Thank you, Vincent. Vitiligo is a loss of skin pigment that causes white spots or patches to appear on the skin. For the patients, finding the right treatment is often challenging. So is a stigmatization and the rejection they are often confronted with. Fashion model Chantel Winnie has taken the fashion world by storm. But the young Canadian model says it wasn't always easy.
I submitted my portfolio into many agencies in Toronto, and I always got response back like, oh yeah, you know, you have a nice body and nice proportions, but we don't know what to do with you. We don't know where to place you, so sorry, but no.
Winnie has vitiligo, a long-term condition that causes pale, white patches to develop on the skin when the body's pigment-forming cells are destroyed. According to the medical journal JAMA Dermatology, about 0.5% to 2% of people have vitiligo worldwide. Vitiligo is generally considered to be an autoimmune disorder when the immune system attacks the body's own tissues and organs. In people with the condition, the immune system appears to attack the pigment cells, called melanocytes. Medical experts say while vitiligo may be more noticeable in dark-skinned people, it occurs with similar frequency in all ethnic groups. Irene Flores is from Bolivia.
In El Alto, there are a lot of people who has it, especially in the lips, in their fingers. So I understand the disease and see it's something normal. But some people, and even some uneducated kids say, why is she like that? What does she have? So it's a little difficult. They think it's contagious.
People who suffer from vitiligo can feel stigmatized, distressed, and isolated. For Winnie, modeling opportunities have come her way because she says times have changed.
You know, I feel like even the top models right now have a lot of personality, and I feel like that's what people are looking for, you know, something that they can relate to, you know, a real person. So I feel like the industry is very much so opening up, widening their eyes.
A number of treatments are available for vitiligo, including drugs, light therapy, and surgery. But experts say there is no medication available to stop it spreading or to prevent it reoccurring. Joining us live via Skype from Detroit, Michigan for more on vitiligo is Dr. Iltefat Hamzavi, co-chair of the Global Vitiligo Foundation and a specialist with the Henry Ford Hospital Department of Dermatology. Dr. Hamzavi, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
Help us to understand this condition. What causes vitiligo? Are some people more susceptible to developing it versus others?
Yeah, so vitiligo, as your segment suggested, is an autoimmune disease, and families that tend to have other autoimmune diseases tend to have vitiligo more commonly found in their family members. So if you have an autoimmune disease like hypothyroidism, some forms of lupus, some forms of eczema, your risk of vitiligo goes up.
So if someone is aware of the risk, is there a way to prevent it from developing at all?
Not to our knowledge. Just like any other autoimmune disease, stress and diet may play a role. Taking certain medications may make it worse, but really we don't have a clear idea of what the trigger is.
So we don't know the trigger, but could it be also the environment? You talked about stress and other things, but what about the environment? What about lifestyle?
So we've been looking at vitiligo, and many centers throughout the world are trying to figure out, are there regional variations? And when we can have very strong epidemiologic studies, we can answer that question, but today we can't.
So when someone sees a patch on their skin, the white patch, how much time does it take typically to develop into full-blown vitiligo? Because we see that there are some people who have it more spread on their body, and other people it's maybe in just some specific spots.
Right, so it varies. So some people can have vitiligo, they get one spot and it never progresses beyond that one spot. Other people can have a spot and it rapidly progresses to other parts of the body. One thing we do know is that if you treat vitiligo early, you can have a much better response. And you can have a normal level of skin pigmentation the more aggressive you are in the early phases. So we know we can stop progression in most patients. But at the same time, the natural course of the disease is that maybe about 10 to 15% of people have a spot that doesn't progress, and maybe another 10 to 15% of people, and that's an approximation, it's not an exact number, will end up with progressive vitiligo. Now, the ones that are progressive obviously have a much more difficult condition because the body keeps changing in appearance.
So when we talk about treatment to address it, perhaps preventing it from spreading further, what are we looking at in terms of what you guys, what is available in your practice, for example?
So within our practice, and Henry Ford Hospital is a very active, large vitiligo system with a lot of research as well as clinical trials and patient care. And the members of the Global Vitiligo Foundation can offer some top-notch care that not all centers do have, but throughout the world, you can do two things. Number one, you can stabilize disease. Number two, you can repigment, and they're two separate processes. So stabilization can range from using a topical cream. It can involve the use of light treatments. It can involve the use of oral medications that suppress the immune system. You can also repigment using light treatments and some of those creams as well as surgical treatments where you take small samples of skin, extract the color and skin cells, and place them back on the recipient sites. So we have two techniques, and again, they're effective, especially in the early phases. And in clinical research, we have many more advances coming up in the next few years.
But after a patient goes through different treatments available according to their needs, what are the chances of vitiligo resurfacing, developing again?
So it's always present. You can never say you can cure vitiligo, which some people say that there's nothing that we can do. So we can't cure the condition. I can't give you one thing that will solve your condition for the rest of your life. But I can work very hard with you to preserve the pigment that you do have and then repigment the color that you've lost. But you do have to undergo treatment. Now, about a quarter of patients will respond to treatment and they'll never have it again. And if you're a surgical candidate, you have a specific type of vitiligo. In those patients, you can potentially put them into permanent remission where they don't have it come back. But each patient's a little different. And so in general, you can't cure all people, but you can improve a vast majority of them. And there are some people who can go into permanent remission. But you can never say cure right now because we can't reverse the underlying pathology yet.
So then, before we end, give us some basic steps for someone who just sees a white patch on their skin and they're thinking, I may have vitiligo. What do you suggest they do?
So number one, go see your doctor. And if they can see a dermatologist, even better. And assess whether or not it is truly vitiligo. There are a few tests that we can do with black lights and some blood tests to assess that, or a skin biopsy. Now, if you do have vitiligo, treat early. And don't give up, because the treatments do work, but they take a long time to work. And so it may be 3 to 6 months up to a year of treatment, but you can have significant improvement in that. Secondly, the social, psychological elements have to be addressed from the beginning. So if you're in a culture that really has a challenge with pigment and its appearance, start to address those areas early. But treat early, have a physician evaluate you, and then we can get you in a good course of treatment.
Early intervention is key. Dr. Hamzavi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And that was Dr. Eltefat Hamzavi. He is co-chair of the Global Vitiligo Foundation and a specialist with the Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan. Now, there's a glimmer of hope in the fight against the HIV/AIDS virus. A new vaccine has produced a favorable immune system response during a trial on nearly 400 people. VOA correspondent Mariama Diallo has details from the recent study published in the Lancet Medical Journal.
Around 37 million people are living with HIV and AIDS, with 1.8 million new infections and 1 million deaths each year, according to the World Health Organization. But trials for a new AIDS vaccine has shown robust immune responses in rhesus monkeys and humans. Dan Baruch is among the principal investigators of the study.
This study is now testing whether this vaccine indeed protects humans against acquisition of HIV infection.
That phase began in November in southern Africa, where 2,600 at-risk young women are being tested.
While there are many different vaccine candidates that have been tested in the laboratory and animal models and even small-scale human studies, very few have reached the point of testing of an efficacy trial.
HIV has infected around 80 million people worldwide since it was first detected in the 1980s. A safe and effective vaccine will represent a huge breakthrough.
So we're pleased with the results so far, but we're cautiously optimistic because we will not know whether this vaccine works in humans until this next study is done.
The first interim data from the phase 2 study is expected in 2021. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @LenorMoudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Lenore. I'll be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health report every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, a major sigh of relief is being felt in Thailand as rescuers on Tuesday pulled out the last members of the boys' soccer team and their coach, who had been trapped inside a flooded cave since June the 23rd. The rescued boys are under quarantine at a local hospital and a close medical supervision. Arash Arabasadi reports.
Rescue operations came to a close Tuesday as crews evacuated the final members of the Wild Boar youth soccer team and their coach, who had been trapped in a flooded cave in Thailand since June 23rd. Most of the boys are at a nearby hospital under close medical supervision.
Upon arrival, we gave the boys tetanus and rabies shots, vitamin B1 and antibiotics through their veins, according to the treatment plan. In addition, we have found that 2 of the boys' X-ray results were abnormal, suspecting they might have pneumonia.
The hospitalized boys have so far been kept separate from their families, though some have seen each other through glass and spoken by phone. Medical officials will need to determine the boys' lungs are free from what is known as cave disease before releasing them from the hospital. The last remaining boys rescued Tuesday received on-site medical attention. Rescuers have been racing the clock since divers found the team on July 2nd. Monsoon rains have threatened both the stranded team of non-swimmers and rescue experts sent to save them. One seal died Friday after dropping air tanks along the cave's escape route. But today it seems rescue efforts were not in vain. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Woodwork is any part of a house or building that is made of wood.
Crawl out of the woodwork.
This expression sounds troubling.
I won! I have the winning lottery ticket.
Well, that's great. How much money did you win?
I won $25,000. But please, don't tell anyone.
You're right.